Hello there. Welcome to Intercept CSA, the podcast, where we break harmful silence with truth, healing, and protection, one conversation at a time. I'm Inimfon Samson, your host and guide for this conversation. Thank you for joining me. If you have parents or people caring for children around you, do make an extra effort to have them listening. Place your devices beside them. Invite them to lean in. Every bit of awareness counts for children. Now, a gentle reminder before we go any further. This conversation might be triggering. Remember to breathe, pause, and do what feels safe to you before you return. I recently just had my first dental appointment, and it's something I've been looking forward to for such a long time. Because I'm an adult and I want to begin to have some stable health and wellness routines in my life. And a dental routine is one of those. So I arrived there with a friend, sneakers on, backpack strapped, because I'm heading somewhere else after to do some admin work for Intercept CSA. I'm feeling very confident. I feel like I'm in a very good place, all round. I approached the receptionist who took me through the card process and then ushered me into the dentist's office for a free assessment. The dentist is very kind and looks familiar, but I was sure I'd never met him. The assessment ended and I went out to wait because someone was actually excused to allow me have the initial assessment. After some time, I finally went in. Remember that I'm excited about this trip and that hasn't changed. So excited that my friend is even teasing me for how giddy I am. When I entered the room, I realized there had been a work shift. This time, there was a female dentist. I had stepped out of the building for a little while, and that must have been when she came in. She too had this warmth I was immediately drawn to, so I felt comfortable. She began to chat with me about my reason for coming to the dentist. Then I told her, and she asked me, "Is this your first time?" I said yes, and we laughed about a couple of other things while she broke down what was going to happen and how. Soon enough, my bib was fixed. I stretched out on the chair and the process began. "Open your mouth," she said, and I opened wide. Then she began to try to lift my lip. Each time I felt her hands slip off again and again. I didn't even realize she was struggling at first. I just thought her gloves were slippery. Until she said, "You are not relaxed. Could you relax so I could hold your lips?" And in my mind, I'm thinking, is it me? I'm very relaxed though. But I chuckled anyway and rearranged my body on the chair. Then she tried again and again and said, "I can't grip your lips. Your whole jaw is tensed. Nothing is moving." By this time, I'm a bit flustered, but I sat up a little and tried to put myself together again. And it doesn't even cross my mind to speak to myself or take a deep breath because I don't feel tensed. As I'm lying down there, I'm already planning to get my parents there and everyone in my life who doesn't have a routine. But then after a while, she took her hands off my mouth and said, "This is a safe procedure. You are safe. I'm just trying to clean your teeth. I will use this and work in your mouth until everything is good. If you feel pain anywhere, tell me and I'll adjust. I want to make sure you feel safe about your dental appointment so you can come back next time. Is that okay?" I just nodded. A few minutes later, she said, "Now you're a lot more relaxed. That's good." I could still feel her hands slipping, but I could tell it was better than before, and she had also decided to work with what she had. We finished that procedure and I went away. But because I investigate myself a lot, I began to question my reaction to that procedure. I know that being at the dentist was new for me, but it was a simple, harmless cleaning. So what was it? As I mentally pictured myself back on that table, eyes closed, waiting for the dentist to get the work done, I suddenly realized what it was. Just lying down there, releasing myself and allowing some stranger to touch me had awakened a bodily response that had nothing to do with that moment or my feelings. Because of the violations I had experienced in the past, my body had developed its own defense system. And while I was lying down there, mentally excited about the visit, my body was busy defending me by locking up. And in just a simple pause to communicate, the dentist, without being aware, ended up addressing that split experience I was having and restoring me to a place of safety. In later episodes, I'll bring back this story and talk about something very key in the dentist's ability to have done that and why it can be life-saving in some situations with regard to people who have a lived experience of child sexual abuse. But that's for later, so stay close. So when I came to this conclusion of my body acting from a learned defensive response, it wasn't that I had read anywhere or heard from anyone that a dentist visit could push that to the surface. It was just a combination of a few things. First, my natural ability at putting two and two together. Second, my knowledge of my history and my journey with child sexual abuse, most of which I've captured in my upcoming memoir. Also, all the healing I've experienced, which created an emotional distance from the moment and didn't allow the events to get to me, overwhelm me or anything. Because I have moved forward and I'm also aware and I have made peace with the fact that even in that healing, my body may still respond in ways that will need me to coach it through certain experiences. And finally, all the research I've done on the subject of child sexual abuse, its workings, its aftermath, and so on. All of that has sharpened my ability to spot and name situations like that. For me then, it was just a brand new personal discovery of how the aftermath of child sexual abuse can show up in unlikely places. And I didn't think it stretched to mean that other people with a similar history may experience something like that in the same situation. However, recently I was listening to a podcast, and a psychologist who has been working with survivors of child sexual abuse for many years shared that a dental examination is one of the common places where people suddenly remember abuse or have a bodily reaction or experience that leads them to uncover or confront child sexual abuse in their lives. And that actually made perfect sense when you consider the position of vulnerability created by the procedure and also gave credibility to my conclusion. I began with this simple story to lead us into this. Child sexual abuse is not just something bad that happened. It is something that keeps happening inside a person long after the act is over. It is not just in dental chairs that people lock up or freeze or experience the burden of this crisis. Children are shutting down in schools. You see them, they are always looking lost. The teacher is calling, they are not answering. And in the hands of a poor educator or someone who is not emotionally aware, verbal and emotional abuse can be added on top of the sexual abuse that the child is experiencing or may have experienced. There are also children wetting the bed even at age 10, unable to wake up because sleep is an escape. Some are not playing like other children. They are angry all the time, stealing, fighting, always sick, always withdrawn. Some are not even showing it in the way we expect children to show pain. They are trying to silence the voice in their head, telling them that they are spoiled by fighting for better grades, being part of every event in school, in church, everywhere. Anything to control the external image people have of them. Anything to shield people from seeing who they think they are internally. They are trying to walk their way out of a crippling reality. We are at home around them, but we don't know a girl is quiet because her uncle touches her when they're alone. We are around them, but we don't know that a boy can't sleep because the house help climbs into his bed at night. We are around them, but we don't know that a cousin who has come to spend the holidays is touching the baby. Children are shutting down in ways we are not seeing. And it doesn't stop in childhood. Adults who have also grown in silence are shutting down too. You see it in marriages. Two people who promise to love each other, but none of them is aware that the other is still carrying this silence. A silence that is quietly stealing the happy ever after they hoped for. A silence that no amount of love songs or wedding pictures can fix. You see it in fathers who don't know how to be gentle. You see it in mothers who are always on the edge, in traders, in business people, in professionals, everyday people who are trying to do their best but are still haunted by the things they've never told anyone. Things they wished they had the courage to say, even as they stood over their parents' grave. Child sexual abuse is more than a legal issue, even though justice is important. It is more than a mental health issue, even though that matters too. Why do I say that? Because usually the first betrayal of a child or the first betrayal a child experiences is not the absence of justice or people who are aware of mental health. The first betrayal a child experiences is the absence of ordinary, everyday people who understand the meaning, who understand the weight, who understand the depth of child sexual abuse, whether it is before abuse happens, when it happens, or after it happens. The response of the first adults who found out I was sexually abused was a very important and a very key window for healing. But none of the people who interacted with me recognized it to be abuse. None of them knew what to do or how to respond to a child who had been sexually abused. And the cost of that singular absence is not that a child was sad or hurt. The cost of it is the fact that I would have had a very different childhood, a very different life if someone knew just what to do or say or not say. So ignorance does come at a huge cost. Those people who actually do love me tremendously can't give me back almost 15 years of my life in the way that I would have had it. It's gone. So there's a loss I have had to accept in order to heal. And there's a longing for a life I have had to release in order to heal. I started Intercept CSA because the word intercept captured the true definition of what healing means to me right now. Healing has more than changed my life. It has stopped a vicious cycle that was eating at my mental, physical, and emotional health. Intercept, like I said in the introductory episode, also captured the reality of child sexual abuse, not just for me, but for millions and millions of children and adult survivors around the world. The sad reality that child sexual abuse and everything is set in motion is a cycle, one that does not stop unless there is an interception. I celebrate all the work of those who have been at the front lines. People in Akwa Ibom State, the Ministry of Justice, FIDA, FEREP, in Lagos, Shecheyara, and everywhere across the nation and around the world. People who have devoted their lives to protecting and keeping children safe. I celebrate you. Now, this is a whole community call because child sexual abuse needs a whole community response. All of us. We need more awareness, more chances to intervene, more commitment from every one of us to intercept this, and more willingness to learn all we can and unlearn all we can about it. Not just for the children hurting now, but for the adults they will become and for the world they will create. I don't know if I want to be called a survivor of child sexual abuse. Not that anything is wrong with that. But I've experienced a healing that I want to make available for everyone. And I know a pain that I hope I can end for many. All awareness effort at Intercept CSA is to make sure no chance at prevention, intervention, or healing is lost. And we are acting on that pledge beginning with this podcast. You will never know how much you can change by making sure someone around you, someone close to you, everyone you can reach listens to this podcast. You will never know. Maybe something I say or something a guest says in later episodes will lead someone to reassess their homes, recheck and reevaluate things, and ask a child a question. You never know. And more importantly, maybe someone wouldn't need to wait for more than a decade to finally feel heard. So if you're listening to this podcast, I have faith in you. I sincerely believe that people will do better if they know better. I have seen people's hearts change. I have seen people take better action. So when my words contradict what you believe, please stick around. Let's do the collective work of learning and unlearning so we can do right by every child. Now that I know that we're on the same page for this first episode, I want to give you the basic lens that will help you recognize sexual abuse or child sexual abuse. So, what is child sexual abuse really? And to begin, let's define some key terms you will hear often in this conversation and throughout this podcast. First up, consent. In simple terms, consent means saying yes because you want to and because you fully understand what you're agreeing to. Keep that in mind. Next, perpetrator or abuser. This is a word we use to refer to the person who has done harm or carried out the abuse. Then there's grooming. We'll explore this more in this episode or another one. But in short, grooming is a manipulative process. It's when an abuser builds trust with the child and often the family as well as a way to lower defenses, to gain access, and then create opportunities for abuse. You'll also hear me mention boundaries. Boundaries are the limits we set or others set to protect their emotional, physical, and sexual space. For example, if someone doesn't want to be hugged or touched, that's their boundary. It's the limit they've placed to protect themselves, and it's something that amounts to a personal violation when it isn't respected. Another word is trauma. Earlier, when I was talking about my experience at the dentist, that's an example of trauma. It is how abuse or distress changes or alters how a person feels, thinks, or experiences the world. Please note, a bad experience doesn't always lead to trauma. But if the effects of that event starts to show up emotionally, physically, and mentally in ways that are tied to the memory of it, then it was traumatic. For example, if someone was robbed in the night and now whenever night falls, the person begins to experience breathlessness or breaks out in sweat. And that experience is directly tied to them replaying the robbery incident, then that is trauma showing up. You'll also hear me say victim sometimes or survivor. They both describe someone, or a child in this case, who's been hurt, but they carry different meanings. Victim is often used in the immediate aftermath of abuse or in legal or crisis context. So if you're hearing lawyers talk or you're just hearing someone report abuse, you will likely hear them say, oh, the victim, or this is the victim. Survival, on the other hand, is an empowering word. It is a language used to restore the child or adult who experienced CSA in the past to a state of description that honors them first as a human being and as people who have moved forward or are moving forward, people who have healed or are healing, and people who are thriving irrespective of what has happened or what happened. And lastly, before we dive into the definition of child sexual abuse itself, there's the word power imbalance. And this power imbalance is at the root of so many other types of abuse. And it's when one person has more control, influence, or authority over the other person. And in the case of abuse, uses that power to manipulate, silence, and overpower a child. Examples of relationships with power imbalance is a child and an uncle, student and a teacher, a child and a nanny or caregiver, or a young person and an older family friend. In all of these cases, if you pay attention, the adult holds more authority, influence, or control, making it difficult or impossible for the child to freely say no or fully understand what is happening if there were to be abuse going on. This imbalance is what makes the sexual activity within these kinds of relationships abusive, regardless of whether the child seemed to have agreed. Now that we've covered that, let's define what child sexual abuse actually is. Child sexual abuse, or CSA, as we'll call it from time to time, is any sexual activity involving a child, whether the abuser is an adult, an adolescent, or even an older child. It happens when a child does not have the ability to give informed consent or cannot give informed consent. And we have said that consent is saying Yes, because a person wants to, and because they fully understand what they are agreeing to. And children, because of their age and their stage of development, cannot be said to truly give consent. They may say yes, but what are they saying yes to? They don't understand the concept of safe sex or the emotional, mental, and physical implications of sexual activity. Neither do they have the cognitive maturity to make a decision of that weight. And so, any adult or anyone older who acts on a seeming sexual opportunity they have with a child has committed a crime. And the Child Rights Act of 2003 defines a child as anyone under the age of 18. Legally, this should mean full protection under the law. But for context, especially for those outside Nigeria, while this legal standard exists, its application isn't always consistent across the country. In some regions, cultural, religious, and systemic factors are still creating gaps in how this protection is enforced. But regardless of those gaps, I believe here is what the law intends and what we must insist on, especially when we're talking about abuse or exploitation. The idea of that definition is to offer a protection to children 0 to 18 that stands irrespective of any factor. So that protection stands whether that child is very smart, whether that child looks grown or sounds mature. That protection stands whether anyone knows them to be sexually active with their peers. Because this is one reason that some people use when they abuse children. They say, oh, they're already sleeping with their... I know that that girl has a boyfriend or she's already sleeping with the boy down our street. It doesn't matter. That protection stands whether they agreed to be someone's girlfriend, like I just said, or boyfriend. It stands whether they dress or speak in ways that seem older than their age. It stands whether they seem to have made sexual advances first or anything. It stands whether they're in the university or have handled lots of responsibilities that reveal them as independent thinkers and people who are effective leaders of themselves. Whatever is the case, the definition of a child doesn't change. The law still sees a child. And this is such an important definition and point to communicate to the people around you, to your brothers, your sisters, your cousins, your neighbors, everyone. Let everyone know that the law protects children 0 to 18. The law views them as vulnerable and deserving of protection. And there are so many reasons why this is the case, no matter their ages, especially on the subject of age. Because some people believe that younger children, 0 to 6 or 0 to 7, deserve more protection than age 7 to 18 or children aged 7 to 18. But why should we still view them as vulnerable and deserving of protection? And here are a few reasons. It's because their decision-making isn't fully developed. In coming episodes, we'll have people come here and talk to us about child psychology and how their minds work. And all of those things that will help us understand why children cannot reasonably be put in a position where they are said to have made a decision of that magnitude. Another reason is that they are deserving of protection because they are easier to influence. And this still goes back to cognitive maturity, experience in life, and all of those things. Also, they are still learning boundaries. They are still learning identity. They are still learning safety. So as adults, we should always be the ones acting responsibly and not the other way around. And when that protection is breached, it is the adult. It is the older person. It is the perpetrator, not the child, who is accountable and should be held accountable in our daily response to child sexual abuse. And I know that this is hard for us to absorb or take in because unconsciously we've built a cultural lens where we believe children's maturity is not based on science, the law, or their developmental readiness, but on so many other factors. In some way, we've elevated capacity over actual capability. And I speak on this in my book through my personal lens. But we base it on so many factors. We base this idea of maturity on factors like how much information we've given them, how long they've accompanied us to church, how much spiritual knowledge they have, and how it is supposed to show up in their day-to-day life, or even how intelligent we as parents or caregivers were as children their age, and all manner of other factors. But what we're establishing here for this episode is that a child's knowledge does not absolve the abuser of responsibility or excuse them or put the child in the position of an adult. We've established why that is the case. Children must be protected, and the responsibility of abuse rests squarely on the abuser according to the law. Before we wrap up this episode, I want us to take a few minutes to talk about something really important as well. And that's the nature of child sexual abuse. This is something we need to understand clearly because it explains why children are so vulnerable, why they are never to be blamed, and why we need to put stronger protections in place around them. So let's break it down. First, child sexual abuse is really about power. It's not about relationships or consent. It's the fact that someone else is using their position, their age, their knowledge, their authority to take advantage of a child who is still growing, a child who is still learning, a child who is still building a clear understanding of who they are to trust, a child who would most likely not choose them as sex partners if they were truly ready for that kind of relationship, or if they truly had the lens to make a clear-eyed decision on the matter. So that power imbalance means that that child is already at a disadvantage. They don't fully understand what is happening. And they usually don't even have the tools to resist or speak up. And in most cases, the people who are on that other end of power are people who they've been taught to respect, which can cloud and hinder a child's ability to even use the basic no that we said, okay, if somebody is touching you in some sort of way, or if someone is doing something that is uncomfortable for you, say no. All of that and so many other cultural things that still come into play allow for this, especially in our climate where children are very subservient in a sense, which still allow for these things to happen. And we'll still talk about how culture plays a role soon. So the second thing I want us to keep in mind as regards to the nature of abuse is grooming. A lot of people think that abuse is always sudden or violent, but often it is slow. It is very calculated. Like we said, the grooming process is a manipulative process. Someone walks into the process, deliberately builds trust, and gives the child attention, praise, whatever it is that they think they need. They make the child feel seen. They make the child feel safe. They make the child feel special. And over time, they begin to cross boundaries gradually. So gradually or so slowly that the child might not even realize that something is off. This is especially for older children. By the time the abuse happens, the child also feels confused and even responsible. And that confusion can keep them silent for a very long time. So imagine that someone has been coming, like your music teacher has been coming every single day. And every day they came, they were very nice. They noticed that mommy shouts a lot. So every opportunity they get, or they notice that mommy and daddy shout a lot. So every opportunity they get, they tell you, oh, you're such an amazing child. Don't worry, you'll be fine. You'll soon grow up. You'll soon leave the house. They just talk to you and make you feel seen. They hide and bring you gifts. Everything you're not getting outside of him or her, they provide it for you. So now imagine when one day the person comes and says, oh, I don't know, can we play a game? And you say, what's that game? And they say, I'm going to act like I'm your doctor, and you're going to act like you're a patient. And then you're going to do this, and then you're going to do that. I imagine that the child will act on those things until it has gone too far for it to not have happened. And now there is the confusion of, okay, what just happened? Okay, who do I speak to? Where is the safe adult? All of these things come into play. So it's a very, very tricky process. And then there is manipulation and secrecy as part of the nature of child sexual abuse. I could weave that into grooming, but we'll keep it separate. Abusers often pressure children to keep quiet. Sometimes they make threats and other things. Other times they use guilt. They might say things like, no one will believe you. And if you tell somebody, something bad will happen to me. Or they tell the child, if you tell your mom will take me to prison and I will die. All of those things. Or they can also threaten the child that something bad will happen to them. Sometimes they also convince the child that they are bad people and that they wanted it. This your eye. You know what you want. You'll be a very bad girl or a very bad boy. They convince the child that they wanted it and they love it. And because grooming was already involved, in most cases, the child feels responsible because of how they had welcomed the person in the past. So that kind of emotional manipulation traps the child. And when we, who are the people around them, do not notice the signs and do not know how to respond, that silence only deepens. When we don't see that all of a sudden, the music teacher that a child used to be excited about comes to the house and the child doesn't even want to come out. So rather, most of the time, what happens is that we get a cane and we flog them. Go out. Join your music teacher or your math teacher is here. You should be out. And we don't ask questions. We don't ask what's going on. Are you all right? And all of those things. And something that is hard for most people to accept is this, that abuse often comes from people the child already knows and trusts. So we're not even thinking that abuse is happening within our house. We're thinking, I made sure my children don't visit anybody outside this house. They are always indoors. Everything is just perfect. So we're living in this bubble that doesn't exist. You don't realize that family, friends, family members, teachers, religious leaders, pastors, music directors, neighbors, helpers, nannies, all these people are the kinds of people who abuse children. And that's not to say that every nanny and every music director. I'm just explaining that there is, like we say in child protection or when we're talking about child sexual abuse, there is no profile. So if you have a mental profile for an abuser, please, there's no mental profile. There's no profile for an abuser. Think of anybody you know in your life and know that it's possible that that person, as good as they are, as great as they are, it's possible that they can be abusers. Because sometimes children even disclose abuse, and because we have this mental profile of what an abuser should look like, and it does not look like our siblings, it doesn't look like their uncle, it doesn't look like all these people. We don't believe children, and we fail children. We fail children. So when a child is hurt by someone everyone seems to trust or respect, they don't just feel violated. They feel stuck. Because now they are wondering, who will believe me? Will everybody be angry with me for saying something? Or like somebody recently told me, I was afraid of scattering the family. And that is, imagine a child having to be in a position of abuse and then they can't talk to somebody because they realize that one word about that abuse would mean that the entire family would turn on their head. And a child has to carry that kind of heavy thing around. So when we talk about the nature of abuse, we need to remember that it's not always loud. It's not always violent. It doesn't always even look like danger. It is often very quiet, often very slow. It hides in relationships. It hides in places of trust. And it depends, or usually takes advantage of the fact that a child is unsure of what abuse even means because we've never given them language. We've never ever told them anything about abuse. Everything we talk about is the nature of consensual sex. We tell them, okay, be careful. Don't let anybody touch you. So it's already like there is this understanding that whenever a sexual activity happens, it will be because they wanted it. It will be because someone asked them. We don't let them know that there are people who will try to take without asking. That sometimes people will try to take advantage of them. That sometimes all these different abusive situations can happen. That sometimes somebody will come and try to talk to them about sex, give them sexual information to make them feel among, because they want to exploit them. They want to put pictures in their head. We don't make it plain. We don't make it clear. And we hide all of these things. And children who don't even have any information, children who are unprotected, children who are unheard. In fact, if you have a child that does not speak to you about anything apart from good morning, it's very likely that they are being abused, they have been abused, or will be abused. Because children who are unheard, Children who are not in safe situations are the kinds of people that predators and people who want to abuse children look out for. And they see what you're not seeing. They see the gap in your home, even though you are not seeing the gap in your own home or in your institution, because it is not just a family thing. It is happening in institutions, it is happening in churches, it is happening in schools. So they see the gap in your system, even though you cannot see it. That's why we don't ask, why didn't they speak up? We should ask, why didn't we make it safe for them to speak up? We shouldn't ask them, why didn't you show me that this had happened or that had happened? Like whatever it is, whether it was an injury they came back and managed through, we should ask ourselves, why didn't we notice the signs? Why was the adult able to, whoever this predator or perpetrator was, what was it in our system that allowed for them to get that close without any check, without being questioned? So children should never be expected to protect themselves from situations they didn't create. That is our job as adults, as communities, as systems. That is our job. And the more clearly we understand how abuse actually works, the better equipped we will be to prevent and respond to it. Not just with judgment or with blame, but with protection, with support, with accountability, and with care. If you stayed with me until now, your time has already begun to count for children. And you can't imagine what it will do for the children around you. Thank you for listening to this very important conversation. Understanding what child sexual abuse is and even being able to recognize it, to have a lens into it, is a crucial step towards intercepting child sexual abuse and making the society a safer place for every child. In the next episode, we'll talk about a host of things, but we'll also talk about why children don't tell and why adults can't see. And we will talk about factors that create opportunities for abusers. Think of this season like we're building a solid foundation before we go on to other things. We hope that this space will be a place where people can gain sufficient knowledge about child sexual abuse just from following the weekly episodes. We want to end every episode with a call to action. And for this week, if you have a child in your care, whether as a teacher, a parent, a tutor or coach, Sunday school lead, etc., wherever you have an opportunity to see and relate with children safely, I want you to do something simple this week. Ask them, how are you? That's it. Just how are you? Don't ask it like you have a lot of places to be. Don't ask it while you're scrolling on your phone or on your way to your door. Don't ask them like, oh, you are not paying bills. Your problem shouldn't be a lot. Ask it like you have nowhere else to be. Ask it like you don't mind what you will hear. Ask it like you sincerely have no idea how much secrets or stories that little body is carrying. Ask it in such a way that your sincerity shows. Because how are you is not just a casual question. It's not supposed to be. It's a window question. It opens up a space for a child to feel seen and for you to see. It is an interest question because it tells the child, you matter and I want to be in your world on the level of your truth and not based on my assumptions. It is a permission question because it makes room. It says, I have time. Time for your honesty, time for your tears, and time for things you've been carrying, seeking for where to drop them. And it is an interception question because it interrupts silence. And even for a moment, it breaks the isolation that abuse traps a child in. But also make room for silence. Some children open up after one, how are you? Others need 20. Others need 10. They need consistency. They need safety. They need you to keep showing up even when they don't have the words yet. So don't get tired. Don't stop asking. And if they do respond, listen closely. Whether they say nothing or everything, a truly sincere how are you is not a question children forget. Write me. and tell me what you experienced during this exercise. Please follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Intercept CSA and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast. Remember, together we can intercept abuse and protect the children we all care about. Together we can intercept child sexual abuse for the future. Until next week, see you.